Hey ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Humbert here, and today we're going to be talking about special right triangles. So today we're going to learn special things about right triangles, and basically how we're going to identify each type of right angles. Our right triangles are by their angles. So each of these represent the angles in the triangle. So we have an angle 45, 45, 90. Notice that that adds up to 180. 30, 60, 90. Notice that that adds up to 180. So when we have special right triangles like this, there are certain rules that we can use to not even have to use the Pythagorean theorem. We can use shortcuts or special rules to get the sides in a lot faster demeanor. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at number one. So we're going to get this set up. So when you have a square, you can cut a diagonal through that square. So squares, as we know, have right angles in the corner. Well, when we cut the diagonal and the diagonal cuts the angle in half, each of these angles are 45. So a square has two triangles that are 45, 45, 90 triangles. Now here's a really important thing to notice about a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and that's that both of these sides are the same length. So since both of them are the same length, our legs are equal to each other. They're congruent. So we're going to use that idea moving forward. So let's take a look at what the rule is for the 45, 45, 90 triangle theorem. So we're going to let x represent the leg length. So that means that this is also x, and y is going to represent our hypotenuse. So here's the first rule. If you're given the leg, so they give you this leg, well, if they give you this leg, then you know the value of the other leg because they're equal to each other. So if you're given one of the legs or both of the legs, if you want to find the hypotenuse, you're going to take the leg value and you're going to multiply the leg by the square root of 2. Now we're going to be working a lot with radicals in this note video. For every single problem, I want you to write it as a simplified radical. We learned about that in algebra. We'll review it a little bit today. I want you to give me a simplified answer, and if you want to, you could put an estimated decimal. But I do want to see that simplified radical. If you're given the hypotenuse, in order to find the legs, you need to take whatever you have for the hypotenuse, so whatever value they give you for y, and you're going to divide the hypotenuse by the square root of 2. So if you're given the legs, multiply it by the square root of 2 to get the hypotenuse. If you're given the hypotenuse, divide by the square root of 2 to find the legs. So that's what we're learning about so far. Next, let's take a look at number 2. Find the value of x. Well, x are both of our legs. So here are the two questions you need to ask yourself. What am I given, and what do I need to know? Well, the first thing I'm given, I notice that 12 is sitting across from the right angle. So I'm given the hypotenuse. And given the hypotenuse, and you want to find the legs, we need to divide the hypotenuse by the square root of 2. So I'm going to take my hypotenuse and divide by the square root of 2. Now, looking at this, if you wrote this on your quiz, I would cry. And here's why. You do not want to have radicals on the bottom. We don't want to do that. So you did this thing last year called rationalize the denominator. So what I'm going to do to get rid of that square root of 2 on the bottom, I'm going to multiply by the square root of 2, which means I need to multiply by the square root of 2 on the top. This right here is 1, so I'm not changing the value of the problem. So on the top, I'm just going to have 12 times the square root of 2. When you take a radical and you multiply it by itself, the answer is just the number that's underneath the radical. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is just going to give you 2. Now, you cannot simplify anything that's underneath the radical with anything that's outside of it. You can't break it out of jail. We can only divide things that are outside of the radical. Well, these two things are both outside the radical, so I can divide them. 12 divided by 2 is 6, so I'm left with 6 square root of 2 as my final answer for letter A. Okay, next let's take a look at B. So for B, we're given a leg and we want to find the hypotenuse. Well, the rule if you're given the leg and you want to find the hypotenuse is to take the leg and multiply it by the square root of 2. So really, that's your simplified radical form. It's just 4 square root of 2. If you wanted to type that into your calculator just to see what it is, you would get about 5.66. That's the decimal. It's just an estimate, okay? When you're dealing with radicals, if it's not a perfect square, every decimal you give is going to be rounded and it's going to be an estimate. It won't be exact. So let's take a look at letter C. So for letter C, we want to know our x's. Well, thankfully, they're the same. So I'm given my hypotenuse. So since I'm given my hypotenuse, to find the legs, I'm going to divide by the square root of 2. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to divide by the square root of 2. Well, here's the handy thing. Since we have square root of 2 over 2, that cancels out just like it would 5x over x. So those square roots of 2 cancel out, and I'm left with my final answer for my legs being just 5. Okay, so my answer for that one is 5. Next, let's take a look at these next ones. So find the height of this equilateral triangle. So if we have an equilateral triangle, to find the height, we're going to make the altitude of it. Now remember that every degree in here is 60. Well, this altitude is going to cut it in half. So it's going to be 30. So this is a right angle and this is a right angle. So now we're going to take a look at those 30, 60, 90 triangles. So your short leg for the 30, 60, 90 triangles always sits across from the 30-degree angle. Your long leg, which is over here, always sits across from your 60-degree angle, and your hypotenuse always sits across from that right angle. That's nothing new. So because there's 3 different types here, so we have our short, which is sitting across from the 30-degree angle. It doesn't matter. We know this has to be 60 because we have a 90 and we have a 30. So we can immediately fill this in with 60. So this right here is going to be our long leg. And this over here is your hypotenuse. So next, what we can do is we can fill out our rules. So given the hypotenuse to find the long leg, so if you were given the value of the hypotenuse here, in order to find the long leg, so the one sitting across from the 60-degree angle, there's 2 steps. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to divide the hypotenuse you're given by 2. So whatever it is, you're going to take it and you're going to divide it by 2. Then you're going to take whatever answer you get and you're going to multiply your answer by the square root of 3. So that's your first rule. Divide by 2, then multiply by the square root of 3. Next, if you're given the short leg and you want to find the hypotenuse. So we're given the short, we want to find the hypotenuse. All you have to do is multiply by 2. That's all you have to do is multiply by 2 if you have the short and you want to find the hypotenuse. Next, if you're given the short and you want to find the long, you're going to multiply by the square root of 3. Again, remember, I want those simplified radicals. I don't want to, you can put the decimal answer, but I do want to see that simplified radical as well. Then for the next one, if you're given the long leg and you want to find the short leg, you're going to divide by the square root of 3, which makes sense because that's the opposite of this one. So that makes sense. So really make sure you're writing these down because you can use these rules on your quiz. It'd be really nice to have this out in front of you. If you're given the long leg and you want to find the hypotenuse, 2 steps. First thing you're going to do is divide by the square root of 3. That's the first thing. It's probably going to be the opposite of this, wouldn't you think? And then you're going to multiply by 2. So they're really opposites, all of these rules. So we're writing all of them out. Next, if you're given the hypotenuse and you want to find the short leg, you just take the hypotenuse and divide it by 2. That's all you have to do. So those are all of your rules. So keep those handy while you're doing the homework. I know I did when I was making my key. So let's take a look at A. So for A, we want to find X and Y. Well, let's just start with X. So I need to think, okay, I have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Well, X is sitting across from the 30. So what do I know? I know my long leg because this is sitting across from the 60-degree angle. So I know my long leg. I want to know my short leg. So given the long leg, to find the short leg, we take our answer and divide it by 2. So we're taking 12 and dividing it by the square root of 3. Again, we don't want to have radicals in the bottom. So I'm going to multiply by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. Well, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just going to be 3. So then I have 12 square root of 3. So next, what I want to do is I'm going to take 12 divided by 3, and that's 4. So I get 4 square root of 3 for X. Again, just leave it as that simplified radical. So that's 4 square root of 3. Now I want to find my hypotenuse. So we're given our long leg and we want to find our hypotenuse. So to do that, we need to divide by the square root of 3. Well, conveniently, I already divided by the square root of 3 to get my short leg. So step 1's taken care of by that part. Next thing I need to do in order to get my hypotenuse is I need to take my short leg and I need to multiply it by 2. So when I multiply it, you don't take and distribute it in that way. That's not how it works. All you have to do is take the 2 and multiply it by the 4 because they're both on the outside of this radical jail. So 2 times 4 is 8. So then you have 8 square root of 3 that represents your hypotenuse for letter A. Next, let's take a look at B. So for B, we know our hypotenuse. So we want to find our short leg and our long leg. Well, let's start by finding our short leg because that's only one step. If you're given the hypotenuse, to find the short leg, you need to divide by 2. So we're going to take our hypotenuse and divide it by 2, and that gives us 5. Now we want to find our long leg. So it says if you're given the hypotenuse, to find the long leg, if you're given the hypotenuse, you need to divide by 2, which we did here. So we're already on to step 1. So there's our dividing by 2, and then we need to take it and multiply it by the square root of 3. Well, that's just going to end up being 5 square root of 3. So my long leg is 5 square root of 3, and my short leg is x. Next, let's take a look, or is 5, sorry. Let's take a look at letter C. So for letter C, I want to figure out x and I want to figure out y. Well, first of all, what do I notice about this? Is I notice that this is a right angle, okay? And so I want to figure out, in order to do this, I'm going to have to figure out this length as well. And I'm going to need that for this triangle over here. So let's start by focusing in just on this triangle here. So I know that my hypotenuse is 2 square root of 3. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what x is. Now x is my long leg. So I know my hypotenuse and I need to find my long leg. So the first thing I need to do to find the long leg when given the hypotenuse is I take my answer and then I'm going to divide it by 2. Okay, so that's the first step. Well, when you divide it by 2, that cancels these two out. Again, you can't cancel it out if it's underneath the radical. So that's going to be times the square root of 3. Now my second step, once I've done that, is I need to multiply this by the square root of 3. That's my second step. Well, the square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is going to give us 3. So I get that x is equal to 3. Now, I need to find z because z is going to help me get y because I don't know any of the lengths in that triangle and I need to in order to find y. So I'm going with z. Okay, so to find z, I know my hypotenuse and I want to find the short side. So if I know my hypotenuse to find the short leg, I just need to divide by 2, which I did here. So to get z, I'm just going to take 2 times the square root of 3, and I'm going to divide it by 2. So I end up getting that z is equal to the square root of 3. So this right here is the square root of 3. Now notice when you're looking at this triangle that z represents the long leg of that triangle. So now in this triangle I know my long leg, which is the square root of 3. So since I know my long leg, in order to get y, I need to find my short leg. So I know my long leg and I want to find my short leg. So if you know your long leg, to find the short leg you need to divide by the square root of 3. So I'm going to take my long leg, which is the square root of 3, and I'm going to divide it by the square root of 3. Well, I don't even need to worry about rationalizing the denominator because the square root of 3 over the square root of 3 is just going to be 1. So then I get that y is equal to 1. So that concludes your note video today. Go ahead and show me your note sheet when you're done. Thanks for listening.